Wyoming Territory, July 1883. The moon was high and full when Eleanor Mae Morton ran for her life, the dry wind scraping across her cheeks like the memory of the man she was supposed to marry. Her feet pounded the dirt trail as the hem of her cream-colored wedding dress tore against sagebrush and stone. She did not look back, not when the church bell tolled behind her, not when her father's voice hollered her name into the night like a curse. She kept running. The trail curved down toward the open prairie, and Eleanor's chest burned from the cold night air. Her boots, meant for ceremony not fleeing, slipped on loose gravel. She braced herself as the ground rushed up, and then something enormous and solid crashed into her from the side, a horse. The moment hit like lightning. The world blurred into hooves, dust, and a man's shout. Eleanor hit the ground, breath gone from her lungs. A saddlebag thudded beside her, and the horse reared with a high, startled whinny before backing away. "Hell, are you hurt?" The cowboy's voice came sharp and low as he dropped to his knees beside her. Eleanor blinked up at him, dazed. He was tall, rough around the edges, with a sun-worn face and dark brown hair curling behind his ears. His hat had fallen off in the crash. His eyes, green and steady, searched her face as if the world had narrowed to just her. I think I am all right," she said, her voice shaking. He looked her over quickly, hands hovering but not touching. "You came out of nowhere." "I had to," she whispered. "I had to get away." He looked at the torn lace of her dress, the white veil tangled around her shoulders, his gaze sharpened. "Who were you running from?" "My father," she said. "And a man he wants me to marry. I will not go back." He was silent for a beat, then stood and offered his hand. "Come on, we should get off the road." She hesitated, then took it. "Name's Porter Prescott," he said as he helped her up. His hand was big and warm, calloused like someone who had worked hard and never complained about it. "Eleanor Morton. You heard it all, Eleanor?" "No," she said, though her ribs ached and her knees were scraped raw. I was supposed to be married tonight. To a man you had to flee under the moon." Porter raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like you made the right call." He led her to where his horse had calmed, tied the reins to a low branch, and pulled a canteen from his saddlebag. "Drink?" Eleanor took it, her fingers brushing his. She drank, then sat back on the grass, moonlight catching in her hair. Porter crouched beside her. "You got a place to go?" he asked. "No," she said. "He took everything from me, my dowry, my inheritance, my mother's ring, said if I did not marry Mr. Langley I would be turned out with nothing." "Langley," Porter muttered. "That the banker from Cheyenne?" She nodded. "I have heard of him. Bad sort, likes things his way." "My father made a deal," she said, voice cracking. "He gambled our house away and needed Langley to save it. He offered me instead." Porter's jaw tensed. "That is not saving. That is selling." Eleanor looked down, ashamed. "I know, I stayed quiet too long." "Not tonight," he said. "Tonight you ran." They sat in silence for a while. Crickets chirped. The wind moved slow through the grass. Porter unrolled a blanket from his saddle and handed it to her. "You can rest here for the night. I will keep watch." "You do not have to, I know," he said gently, "but I want to." Eleanor drew the blanket around herself. He walked a few paces away, but not far. He leaned against a tree, arms crossed, watching the dark horizon. "Why were you riding this late?" she asked. "Heading home," he said. "Got a ranch west of here, about a day's ride. Was in town picking up supplies." "Is it just you?" He hesitated. "Just me and my daughter." Eleanor blinked. "You have a child. Her name's Tessa." "She is 6. His voice softened when he said it. "Her mother passed 3 winters ago." "I am sorry." "Thank you," he said. "She was a good woman, strong." Eleanor looked at him in the moonlight. His face was tired but kind, honest. She felt safer than she had in months. "Why did you stop?" she asked. "When you saw me." "Because you looked like someone about to fall apart," he said simply. "And I could not ride past that." She lowered her gaze. "I was." He came closer then, crouching again. "You do not have to go back, Eleanor. I can take you to my ranch. Just for a while, let you figure things out. You do not know me." "No," he said. "But I saw a woman who chose to save herself. That tells me enough for now." Her throat tightened. "Thank you," he nodded. "Try to get some sleep. We will ride at first light." Eleanor curled under the blanket. For the first time in weeks, her heart slowed. She watched him as he sat nearby, watching the night like it owed her safety, and when her eyes finally closed, she did not dream of the church or the man in the black coat. She dreamed of a horse, a quiet cowboy, and the look in his eyes when he first saw her. The sun rose slow and gold over the plains, warming the low hills and casting long shadows through the cottonwoods. Eleanor woke stiff, her back sore from the hard ground, but her breath came easier than it had in weeks. She sat up, brushing dried grass from her sleeve, and saw Porter kneeling by a small fire, coaxing it back to life with careful hands. He glanced over his shoulder. "You're up. There's coffee if you want it." She nodded, rising to her feet and smoothing the wrinkled fabric of her dress as best she could. Her legs ached, and a bruise darkened just below her knee from where she'd fallen. Still, she crossed the space between them without faltering. Porter handed her a battered tin cup. "It's strong." Eleanor took a sip. It was bitter and hot, but she welcomed both. She sat across from him on a flat stone, cradling the cup between her palms. "I'll need to head back through the canyon trail," he said after a pause. "It'll add some time, but it's quiet and will be harder to spot." She nodded, her fingers tightening around the cup. "He'll send someone." "Maybe," Porter said, "but I know these routes better than most." "We'll keep off the main roads." Eleanor looked past him, where his horse stood tethered and still. "What's her name?" "Junibug," he replied, tugging gently on the brim of his hat. "Tessa named her. Said she looked like she'd sneak sweets if you turned your back." Eleanor gave a faint smile, then looked at him fully. "You said you had a daughter." "I do." She hesitated. "Is she expecting you back?" Porter stirred the fire with a stick, his voice quiet. "I left her with Mrs. Albright. She's my neighbor widow from Arkansas, keeps Tessa when I'm gone more than a day." "Does she like living out there?" He looked up, surprised by the question. "She does. She's wild about the calves in spring, keeps a list of names for them. Won't let me name a single one." Eleanor sipped her coffee, picturing it a small girl with sunburnt cheeks and hay in her braids, chasing after calves with a pencil tucked behind her ear. "She sounds like she belongs to the land." "She does," he said. "She's stubborn like her mother was. Picks blackberries like she's planning to feed an army." Silence stretched between them. A magpie called from somewhere deeper in the trees. "I used to think I'd teach music," Eleanor said suddenly. "My mother played the pianoforte. I wanted to give lessons in town, maybe teach girls who didn't have much." "Why didn't you?" She looked down at her boots. "After she passed, my father said it wasn't proper, that I'd marry well and that would be enough." Porter didn't speak for a moment. Then, gently, "What would your mother have said?" "She'd have told him to go to hell," Eleanor said, and the words startled a laugh from Porter. "That's something," he said. "I like her already." Eleanor looked into the fire. "She used to say love was the only thing worth building a life around. Real love, I mean, not arrangements, not bargains. She sounds like someone who knew the cost of the rest." "She did," Eleanor said. "She married for duty. Spent the rest of her life trying to keep me from doing the same." Porter stood, pouring the last of the coffee onto the fire. "Then let's not let her effort go to waste." They packed quietly. He helped her onto Junibug with the ease of long practice and mounted behind her, not crowding but steadying her with a hand at her waist. She felt the warmth of him through the fabric of her dress, solid and unyielding. They rode with the sun behind them, the horses' hooves muffled in dry grass. The trail wound west, away from the towns and railroads, into scrubland that stretched flat and open beneath a wide blue sky. By mid-morning, they reached a narrow pass between two shale ridges. Porter dismounted and led Junibug by the reins, his boots crunching over loose rock. Eleanor leaned forward. "Is it always this quiet out here?" "Not always," he said. "But most times, yes, it's the kind of quiet that lets you think." "What do you think about?" He didn't answer at first. "Then, mostly her, and whether I'm doing right by her." "You are," Eleanor said. "I can feel it just listening to you talk about her." He looked up at her, the corner of his mouth lifting not in amusement but in something steadier. "You ever think of having a place of your own?" She hesitated. I never let myself. Maybe it's time you did. They moved through the pass, shadows casting cool across their faces. Somewhere up ahead, a hawk circled, its cry sharp and lonely above the wind. Eleanor watched Porter from above, the quiet certainty of his movements, the way he gave space without retreating. She had fled with only herself, but now, riding behind this man, she began to wonder what it might mean to arrive somewhere new, not just alone but wanted. Not saved, but seen. And for the first time, she didn't feel lost. The land grew rougher by the hour ridges, folding into shallow draws, sage thickening into greasewood, the scent of dust and dry pine sharpening in the late light. Eleanor leaned forward slightly with the horse's rhythm, her fingers curled around the saddle horn. Porter rode just ahead now, leading Junibug by the reins as the trail narrowed through a dry creek. The sun had dropped low enough to cast the hills in gold, shadows long and blue behind them. Eleanor's legs ached from the ride and her palms were rubbed raw where they gripped leather, but she said nothing. She didn't want to slow him. He glanced back. "You holding up?" "I've had worse days," she said. "Though my spine might disagree." He gave a short breath that might have been a laugh, then nodded toward the stand of cottonwoods ahead. "There's a spring, we'll stop." The water trickled clear over stone, shallow but cold. Porter let Junibug drink while Eleanor knelt beside the flow, dipping her hands in and wetting her face. The chill cut through the heat in her skin. When she looked up, Porter was watching her, crouched nearby with his hat off, elbows resting on his knees. "You know how to ride," he said. "Not well. Well enough to stay on most of the day. I grew up with horses," she said, "but my father didn't like me taking them out alone. You must have found ways to disobey him." "I did," she said, lifting her chin. "Though not often enough." He pulled a strip of dried venison from his saddlebag and handed it to her. She took it without hesitation, hunger cutting through the ache in her legs. "I've got a bunkhouse with an extra room," he said after a while. "It's not much, but the roof holds through storms and the stove works. You can stay there till you decide what comes next." "I don't know what comes next," she said, chewing slowly. "I only knew I couldn't stay. That's enough for now." She studied him in the fading light. "Why are you this kind to me?" Porter looked away, jaw working once before he spoke. "When Clara died, I was angry more than anything, not at her, just at how quick everything changed. One day she was baking biscuits, next she was gone. Folks stopped coming by after the funeral. They gave space like sorrow was something they might catch." "I know that kind of silence," Eleanor said. "Tessa kept asking when her mama was coming back. I couldn't answer her, not then. I just kept moving. Fences needed mending." Cattle didn't care about grief. She waited, letting him speak or not as he wanted. "I guess I learned that kindness don't cost near as much as people think. Sometimes it saves more than the person it's given to." Eleanor looked down at the strip of meat in her hand. "I wasn't expecting to be saved." "I'm not saving you," he said. "Just offering a road that don't lead back." She met his eyes. "That's enough." They camped beside the spring. He built a small fire from dry twigs and pine cones while she gathered what little brush she could carry. The flames crackled low, giving off more comfort than heat. Porter made a pot of beans and passed her a tin plate. She sat cross-legged, skirt tucked close, chewing slowly. "How long since you've been around anyone that wasn't trying to use you?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. A breeze passed through the cottonwoods overhead. "Years," she said finally. "Even before Langley, I was a bargaining chip. My father used to tell me I was born with a price on my head." Porter didn't speak, just poured them both more coffee. "I remember once," she said, "when I was 15, Mama let me go to the schoolhouse alone. It was only for an hour, but I sat at the desk and looked out the window and felt like I could breathe. I haven't felt that since, not until last night." He passed her the cup. "You'll breathe easier out here." Eleanor looked at him, the firelight catching the lines beside his eyes. "I want to work," she said. "Not just sit in some room waiting for the world to happen again. Let me earn my keep. You know how to cook. Well enough. Know how to keep a 6-year-old from climbing into the chicken coop. I've never tried, but I imagine it takes more patience than skill, Porter chuckled. Then you've got the job. They sat quiet after that. The fire died down. Coyotes called in the distance, far off and sharp. He offered her the bedroll again, and she accepted it with a nod. He didn't linger, just settled a few feet away, his rifle across his knees, eyes on the dark. Eleanor lay staring at the stars, the sky wide as a cathedral. Her body ached in places she'd never noticed before: ribs, hips, the small of her back, but it was the kind of pain that came from forward motion. She could live with that. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time she wanted to meet it. And she wanted to meet it beside the man who had looked at her without pity, without question, and simply made room for her in his world. By the time they reached the edge of Porter's land, the sun had dipped behind the hills, leaving the open stretches of prairie bathed in long amber light. The air smelled of dry hay and distant cattle, and a chorus of meadowlarks quieted as they rode past. Eleanor sat straighter in the saddle now, her body sore but steadier, the ache of days behind her settling into something she could carry. She caught her first glimpse of the ranch house just beyond a windbreak of poplars' weathered clapboard, a slanted porch, and a stovepipe chimney trailing a faint ribbon of smoke. A corral stood off to the right, and beside it a barn leaned into the wind like a tired old man. The field stretched out beyond, dusty green and flecked with movement. Eleanor turned slightly. "You said you were alone out here." Porter gave a half-glance over his shoulder. "Mostly. A boy named Lee helps with the calves come branding season. He's off with his uncle up in Laramie for now. Aside from Mrs. Albright and a neighbor or two, it's quiet." They dismounted near the porch, and Porter handed her the reins. "You want to walk a bit?" Eleanor nodded and followed him toward the house. The boards creaked under their boots as they stepped onto the porch. He opened the door and waited for her to enter first. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of lye soap and dry wood. A braided rug lay curled at one corner, and a kettle steamed gently on the stove. A child's drawing, done in pencil on brown paper, was pinned beside the door, a horse with 4 legs on one side and a crooked smile. "She's proud of that one," Porter said, setting his hat on a nail by the door. "Said she drew Junebug from memory." Eleanor studied the drawing, touched by the odd tenderness of it. "It's very accurate," she said, "especially the ears. Tessa always draws the ears first, says that's where the horse keeps its secrets." She smiled, then stepped toward the hearth. There was a rocking chair there, low and worn smooth along the arms. A small patchwork quilt lay folded beside it, stitched in uneven lines. Porter nodded toward a doorway on the left. "That's the back room. You can take it for now. It's got a bed and a wash basin." "I'll get fresh linens." Before she could answer, the door to the second bedroom creaked open and a little girl padded out in stocking feet, her hair sleep tangled and one side of her dress unbuttoned. She rubbed her eyes and blinked at Eleanor. Porter crouched. "Come here, Bug." "This is Miss Eleanor. She's a guest for a while." Tessa stepped closer, her gaze curious but not shy. "Are you the one that fell in the dirt?" Eleanor blinked, then gave a quiet nod. "Yes." "That was me." Tessa studied her a moment longer, then reached into her apron pocket and handed over a small, slightly squashed wildflower. "You can have this." Eleanor took it carefully. "Thank you." "She gives those instead of handshakes," Porter said, standing again. "I like that better," Eleanor said. "It feels more honest." Tessa grinned, then ran to the hearth and picked up the quilt. "That's mine. Mama made it before the snow came. You can borrow it, but don't take it to the barn. I'll keep it here." "Safe and warm." Tessa seemed satisfied with this, then turned to her father. "Mrs. Albright made me eat peas. I didn't like them." Porter ruffled her hair. "I reckon she didn't care." "Nope," Tessa said, already halfway back to her room. Once she disappeared, Porter turned to Eleanor. "She's not usually that forward. I think she likes you." Eleanor looked down at the flower in her hand. "I think I like her too." After Tessa was tucked back into bed and the house had quieted to the soft creaks and sighs of settling beams, Eleanor stood by the back room's window and looked out across the dark. The land beyond the house was wide open and still. No fences cluttered the edges. No voices pressed in. She heard Porter's boots approach the doorway behind her. "I'll be up early," he said. "If you're set on helping, there's milking to do and eggs to gather." She turned slightly. "I don't mind work." "I didn't think you did." He stepped back to give her space but lingered just long enough to say, "You don't have to be anything other than what you are here. Not useful, not agreeable, just yourself." Eleanor held his gaze. "I'm still figuring out who that is," he nodded once. "That's fair." Then he left her to the quiet. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed, the flower still in her hand. No one had asked her to stay. No one had demanded anything in return for kindness. It was unfamiliar terrain, but not unwelcome. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she might grow toward something instead of away. Before dawn, Eleanor stepped into the yard, breath clouding faintly in the early chill. The sky was deep indigo, stars retreating one by one. Behind the barn, the horizon held a thin ribbon of pale orange. She carried a pail in each hand, sleeves rolled high, hair plaited back tight against her nape. She hadn't asked Porter where the milk cow was kept. She'd heard the low bellow before he even mentioned chores. Inside the barn, the cow shifted and huffed, already restless. Eleanor set the stool beside her, checked the bucket's steadiness, and got to work. The rhythm came back quicker than she expected, though her hands weren't used to it. She winced once but didn't stop. "You're ahead of me," Porter said from the doorway, a coil of rope slung over his shoulder. "I couldn't sleep." He stepped inside and leaned against the stall divider. "You always this quick to take to new places?" "I'm not used to having the option," she said, not looking up. He nodded once, then tapped the wood beside him. "We'll move the calves to the lower pasture today. You're welcome to walk it with me if you're up for it." She wiped her hands on her apron. "I'd like that." By mid-morning, they were halfway across the southern field, Tessa skipping ahead with bare feet and a crooked stick she declared a cow rod. The calves moved slow, more curious than bothered, and Eleanor walked beside Porter as the grass brushed her skirts. "She seems to know this land like her own skin," Eleanor said. "She does. Climbs every fence soon as I fix it." Eleanor let her gaze stretch across the prairie. "I never imagined this kind of quiet had so many sounds." Porter looked toward the hills. "Most folks never stop long enough to hear any of them." They paused near a patch of sweet clover and Eleanor bent to pick a sprig. "You ever thought of leaving?" "Once," he said. "After Clara passed, I thought about selling. Thought maybe the house was too full of ghosts, but I couldn't do it." Tessa was still learning the shape of the place. She needed it solid. Eleanor turned the clover stem in her fingers. "You stayed for her." "I stayed because it still felt like home, even with the sorrow, even with the mess." Eleanor looked up at him, and for a breath neither of them moved. The breeze ruffled her collar, and Porter reached out slowly and tucked a loose wisp of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered, calloused thumb brushing her cheek once. "I've never known anyone like you," he said. "I've never been allowed to be known," she said quietly. He let his hand fall but didn't step back. "You're not a guest anymore, Eleanor," her breath caught. "No, you're a piece this place was missing," she swallowed, chest tight. "Do you mean that?" He nodded, green eyes steady. "I don't say what I don't mean." Eleanor took his hand, fingers closing over his. "Then I'm staying." That night she cooked stew from scratch while Tessa set the table with 3 tin plates and a single wildflower in a chip jar. Porter came in late from securing the barn doors and paused in the doorway, watching as Eleanor stirred the pot and Tessa chattered about a frog she'd found near the well. "You all right there?" he asked. Eleanor turned, apron dusted with flour, and smiled. "More than all right." He stepped closer, taking the ladle from her hand and tasting the stew. "You'll have me spoiled." "Good," she said. "You deserve it." After supper, Tessa curled up on the quilt before the fire, head tucked beneath Eleanor's arm. Porter sat across from them, legs stretched out, one boot tapping in time to the girl's soft humming. No one spoke for a long while. Later, once the child had been carried off to bed, Eleanor stepped outside. The porch boards were cool beneath her feet and the stars were out in full. She leaned on the rail, arms folded, and listened to the wind move through the grass. Porter joined her, standing close enough to feel the heat of him. "You've changed the house," he said. "How?" "It feels lighter, like it forgot how to carry grief." Eleanor turned to face him. "I'm not trying to replace anything." "You haven't," he said. "You've just made room for something new." He reached for her hand and she let him take it, their fingers lacing slow and sure. "I never thought I'd be allowed to choose," she said. "You did more than choose," he said. "You rebuilt." She leaned into him, her head against his shoulder. "Then let's keep building." He kissed her hair, slow and reverent. "We will." They married in early autumn. Porter cleared space in the east pasture and the neighbors came with pies and fiddle songs. Tessa insisted on wearing boots with her dress and threw lavender at their feet when they said their vows. Eleanor wore a blue cotton gown she'd sewn herself and pinned her mother's locket at her throat. Porter kept his arm around her waist the whole time, like he'd known she belonged there from the first moment. They fit together in small ways, how she folded his shirts, how he fixed her fence gate just because she'd mentioned it squeaked. She built a small room off the kitchen and started giving music lessons on Sundays. The school teacher from town sent 3 girls her way, and each week the house filled with notes and laughter. Tessa grew taller and louder, and Eleanor braided her hair each morning before chores. She learned to read music, to carry eggs without breaking them, and to keep the kittens from nesting in the hayloft. One winter night, Porter handed Eleanor a wrapped parcel by the fire. Inside was a notebook of blank pages stitched with care. "For what you haven't told yet," he said. And she wrote in it. Stories of the plains, of girls who ran and found their own way, of men who saw strength and chose to stand beside it. They grew older in the quiet rhythm of shared days. No grand declarations, just love steady as the land. And whatever came, they faced it hand in hand.